You know, despite his overwhelming and enduring popularity, Ulquiorra's death was really quite definitive. You know, it felt very final. It seems as though it was never intended for him to return again in any way, shape, or form. I mean, the guy literally turns to dust before our very eyes. However, despite being a big fan of the character, I wouldn't have this any other way. I think it's the perfect way to end the character's story arc, to end the climactic battle he has with Ichigo. I've made a video about the fight that goes on atop the dome and how full of despair and darkness it is. And it's a brilliant metaphor for Ichigo's descent into Hueco Mundo and his becoming more hollow-like, and yet mirrored on the other side of that is the demon Ulquiorra himself, slowly becoming more human, and turning to dust at the end of their fight, blowing away into nothingness, is a really emotional and gut-punch way to end the character's story, and not every villain needs to survive to see out the entirety of the franchise. And of course, Arrancar and Espada dying was par for the course during the Arrancar arc. It really was only an exception to the rule if an Espada or an Arrancar actually lived. Despite that, there's no denying that Ulquiorra truly is one of the series' most popular, not only antagonists, but just characters in general, and a lot of people have theorized about what would actually happen if Ulquiorra somehow survived that fateful fight atop the dome. How would he deal with the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, with the events of that storyline, with the Quincy's invading Hueco Mundo, characters like Kurge Opie trampling Arrancar left, right and centre? How would Ulquiorra deal with all of that? How would Ulquiorra deal with a Hueco Mundo where there's a power vacuum, where it seems like Grimmjow himself might be trying to seize leadership? I do think it is fascinating to discuss. And this really has been a question I've been asked to cover a lot as far as what-if scenarios go in Bleach. So I'm really happy to be talking about this today on my second ever what-if video on the channel. Before we begin, however, guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that button now. You are in the perfect place for Bleach content like this every single week. Make sure to check out the rest of the videos on the channel as well, and give this one a thumbs up before you leave, because it really helps with the exposure on YouTube. Don't forget as well, you can support the channel even further by becoming a member now by hitting the join button down below, and I would really appreciate all the support, so thank you guys. So if we are to discuss Ulquiorra's hypothetical survival, I want to do it in the same manner that I did it with Aizen and the Zero Division, in that I want to try and make it as realistic as possible, set it as much as I can within the events of the story. So that means we need to take a look at the context surrounding Ulquiorra's actual death. Now, as we know, he has his big climactic fight against Ichigo involving Uryu and Orihime as well. Ichigo dies, Zangetsu takes over as his hollow form, his instinct and raw power comes out and absolutely decimates Ulquiorra. And Ulquiorra really doesn't stand a chance in this fight, and he is completely annihilated. Like, half of his body is destroyed, his internal organs are basically gone. Now, as Ulquiorra is especially skilled in regeneration, that means he's able to bring back most of the body parts he has lost. However, it is superficial. The organs that Ichigo destroyed are simply never coming back. And at this point, Ulquiorra really is on borrowed time. And actually, when he saves Uryu's life, when Ichigo is about to use a Sero, Ulquiorra comes in and cuts off Ichigo's horn, which then frees him from the influence of the Hollow. And I always kind of read this scene as Ichigo's Sero going haywire when he gets his horn cut off, and I always kind of assumed it clipped Ulquiorra, and that was what really finished him off. Either way, if he dies from that, or if he died from the injuries he sustained earlier on, the important thing is that both of those injuries were caused by Seros, which means Ulquiorra was never going to come back. No matter what, he was not killed by a Zanpakuto, and like Baragon, they are the only two Espada to not actually be purified. Baragon is killed by his own Respirar, and Ulquiorra is finished off by a Sero. And Ulquiorra's death is very unlike almost every other Arrancar or Espada death we get in the series. It is not immediate, it feels drawn out. It's supposed to feel kind of bittersweet because Ichigo doesn't want to win this way, as he says, and Ulquiorra just kind of watches himself turn to dust. So because of the very definitive nature by which Ulquiorra is actually killed and taken out of the series, this fight essentially has to kind of not go the way it goes for Ulquiorra to actually get out of this alive. Because no matter what happened, by the time Ulquiorra had been severely damaged by Ichigo, he was probably going to turn to ash eventually at some point anyway, because he was literally on his last legs. So, for all intents and purposes, for argument's sake, let's say Ulquiorra manages to escape. Let's say something happens that causes Ichigo to, I don't know, get distracted or change what he's looking at. Doesn't matter, Ulquiorra gets away. Very badly beaten, but alive enough to sustain himself for the rest of the Arrancar arc, and he goes into hiding. Now, Ulquiorra is very different to most other Arrancar we've ever seen. He doesn't seem to be driven by that animalistic urge to show how powerful you are or to dominate other species, to eat other species. Ulquiorra has always remained very stoic, very nihilistic and emotionless, statuesque, and those are the characteristics that have defined him as a character. And because of that, he's always come across, at least to me anyway, as one of the more calculating and intelligent members of the Arrancar. Therefore, I think he would know when he was really beaten. I think he would know that there was probably not much point in him carrying on in the war as it stood, and he would probably find a remote section of Hueco Mundo to disappear to for the time being, to return to that isolation that he knew before becoming a member of Aizen's army. As we saw in the Unmasked data book, he would return to a state similar to that, although of course he is now an Arrancar as opposed to just being a regular Hollow. And you know what, I don't think Ulquiorra would mind this necessarily. I think he would probably enjoy and relish that isolation, that return to the void that he once had. I can see him wandering the sands of Hueco Mundo in the aftermath of the Aizen battle. Remember, Ulquiorra lives to serve Aizen. He is a nihilist after all. He believes that nothing means anything and nothing really matters, so therefore it seems to me that he is serving Aizen out of a sense of duty and very little else. How loyal he actually is to Aizen, I think, would be called into question here. But anyway, Ulquiorra spends a lot of time on his own after the fall of Aizen, after the fall of Hueco Mundo. You know, Yami's dead, characters like Haribel have returned, Neliel's returned, Grimjo's returned, and there is a power vacuum now for these three powerful Espada. And Ulquiorra, I don't think, would necessarily have any interest in that. I don't think he is someone who would be too interested in ruling Hueco Mundo. And to be honest with you, I don't think Ulquiorra would have any issue whatsoever with the duo of Haribel and Neliel running the show. I think the only time Ulquiorra gets concerned with the future of Hueco Mundo is if Grimjo is given too much power, too much authority, because we know the two of them have had a pretty serious rivalry in the past. We know that Ulquiorra is very much a by-the-book Hollow, as by-the-book as a Hollow can be. He's all about following the rules, and in the aftermath of Aizen, Ulquiorra would seek order over chaos every time, I think. And Haribel and Neliel fully represent order in the new world, and Grimjo is a kind of holdover from that more primal and animalistic era. And I definitely think not just out of a spite towards Grimjo, but I think out of a sense of self-preservation and finding himself in the new world, Ulquiorra would definitely choose order. And like I said, despite probably being the most powerful Espada around at this point, I still think he would defer leadership to Haribel with no real recourse. So that's what I think would happen to Ulquiorra in the immediate aftermath of the Aizen battle and the closing days of the Arrancar arc. Most of the Espada are dead, Aizen's rule is over, he is now imprisoned in Muken, and Hueco Mundo has effectively been handed over to a new regime, looking to bring the Hollows into kind of a new era of, you know, camaraderie, of working together with the Soul Society when necessary, but just for once finding law and order among themselves. Like I said, Ulquiorra, I think he roams Hueco Mundo for a little while, finding himself in some way, returning to that void that he once had. I don't think his loyalty to Aizen is so absolute that he would, find some way of travelling to Soul Society or Fate Karakura Town to avenge his fallen master. I think he does mostly what he feels is right at the time and what he needs to survive. So I think Ulquiorra is definitely the kind of Arrancar who would happily stick to himself, and then when this new regime is kind of being built, he makes himself known. He has no interest in taking the throne, but I think he would actively try and keep Grimmjow off it, which would probably lead to some skirmishes between the two of them. I think things obviously start getting interesting when the Vandenreich show up. So we know that Yhwach sends his hunting army and Sternritter J Kurge OP to subjugate Hueco Mundo. And this is at the very start of the 1,000-year Blood War arc. And of course, this does not go unnoticed. And we actually get to see a lot of this in the manga. Harubel is immediately beaten up and captured by Yhwach himself and then imprisoned in Silburn. Neliel is of course still a baby at this point, not really able to do much to fend off the Quincy threat, and instead the Quincy's are met on the battlefield by the Tre Bestias and Lowly and Menely, Ion, all that sort of thing, forming kind of a motley crew to defend Hueco Mundo. And then, of course, we know a little bit later on, after Ichigo and his friends have kind of been and gone, Grimmjow shows up and finishes off Kurge OP. So how fast would Ulquiorra react in this situation? How strong would he be against Kurge? I think it's difficult to say. It's really hard to say. I think in terms of strength-wise, Ulquiorra would probably defeat Kurge with little difficulty. I think, especially if he was to activate Segunda Etapa, it probably wouldn't even really be a contest. Kurge was getting kind of walked around by even a Shikai Ichigo in the early stages of their fight. Obviously, Ichigo is a bit of a special case. And Kurge is absolutely no slouch either, don't get me wrong. He takes down almost the entirety of the Arrancar's defences, but Ulquiorra really is something on a wholly different level. So I think Ulquiorra would probably be able to defeat Kurge fairly easy. Whether he would actually step up to the plate or not, I think is something very, very different. Grimmjow's the kind of guy who would rush in there and kill Kurge because he sees him as a threat to his status as king of the food chain. Ulquiorra is less likely to be bothered by that. Ulquiorra is more likely to want to take on the Vandenreich to preserve this new home he has, this new sense of order. Now, of course, the Vandenreich are probably saying that's what they want as well. They're kind of espousing this idea of order, of enslaving the Arrancar, but if you show moxie and, if you have a willingness to fight, we'll enlist you in our army. And the cold and pragmatic nature of Ulquiorra, this idea of self-preservation, might lead you to think that he would actually opt to join the Vandenreich. It's not said anywhere that Ulquiorra necessarily has an enormous amount of pride being a hollow. It's not said anywhere that he relishes being a hollow really or anything like that, and I could see him joining them as one of their Arrancar recruits. However, truth be told, I don't think that would happen in the actual story. I think Ulquiorra would either remain out of the way in the early stages of this war, or he would intervene to face the hunting army. I think he would definitely fight on the side of the Hollows. I think he would want to keep this newfound sense of law and order that the Hollows have achieved in the wake of Aizen's defeat. But I think obviously it would have been fascinating to see how Ulquiorra would have interacted with characters like Ichigo and Orihime as they get to the Varvelt invasion. And obviously at that point it's really interesting from a narrative standpoint because everything is off the table essentially. All rivalries are set aside, old enemies become friends because really all that matters is stopping Yhwach at this point, or he's just going to destroy everything. And Ulquiorra is a lot more logical and pragmatic than Grimmjow, and if even Grimmjow can come to the conclusion that he needs to work with Ichigo, I think Ulquiorra would as well. They obviously have very different relationships. Grimmjow and Ichigo's is highly antagonistic, but there's almost like more of a rivalry there. Grimmjow doesn't like the idea of Ichigo looking down on him, and Ichigo feels the need to protect his friends from Grimmjow. But their alliance, while uneasy, comes together fairly simply, I think, in a time of need. Ichigo's relationship with Ulquiorra is weird. It's definitely weird. I think Ulquiorra's major relationship would actually come from Orihime. That's where his anchor would be, especially when you consider their last few moments together atop the dome. And Ulquiorra's realization that, you know, this is what a heart is, he's becoming slightly more human. I think that notion would drive him to want to protect maybe more than he had initially envisioned. I'm not saying Ulquiorra would undergo some massive and sudden personality shift that completely changes him into a brand new character, but I think that he would look upon Ichigo, and his friends and what they're doing, how they're invading Varvel, and equate it to how they once invaded Hueco Mundo to save Orihime. And I think this newer, more mature version of Ulquiorra, who has a more wide-reaching view and understanding of the world, would realise what they were doing and what it meant and why it was important. And like I said already, Ulquiorra, I think, would gravitate towards order over chaos in this new post-Aizen world, and I think he would do whatever he could to make sure it remained. You know, it's very much in his favour to stop the Quincy's, so I think he would join up with Ichigo and the others, and I'd love to see that. That would be a sight to see. I think, you know, again, personality-wise, I can kind of see it in my head already. You can imagine them all in the Kukaku cannon flying to Varvel, Grimjo maybe popping off a snide comment at Ulquiorra every now and then. But I think Ulquiorra would remain incredibly reserved, quiet, sitting silently in the corner of the cannon, not really saying anything to anyone. Ichigo may be feeling a little bit uneasy around him, but I think Orihime would be the first one to talk to him, to try and get him to open up and to kind of level with them a bit. I think Ulquiorra would remain, you know, highly reserved throughout the entire thing. He's, you know, going to reiterate that he's not their friend, but, you know, the situation has necessitated they become allies. And you can just see Grimjo constantly antagonising him as well on the trip there, and Ulquiorra growing increasingly annoyed with Grimjo's reckless abandon when they actually get to Varvel, such as when Grimjo just leaps at Askin without a second thought. And speaking of Askin, how would Ulquiorra fare in this final section of the story against the stronger Quincy's like the Schutzstaffel? And I have to say, I think he'd do pretty well. I do think that the Schutzstaffel, though, are on a completely different level to nearly every villain we've ever seen in Bleach. And I know that might be an unpopular opinion, but I think that Ulquiorra would be an invaluable ally. I just don't necessarily think that he would defeat them on his own. We've seen that from the fight with Ichigo in the canon manga, Ulquiorra is very, very powerful, but still mortal at the end of the day. Still possible to be killed by normal means, regeneration or not. Apart from Askin, who is by his own right very difficult to kill, the Schutzstaffel are virtually immortal. They are pseudo-gods, and that's the point. You know, they're supposed to be the archangels who are guarding God himself. You know, very literally with Gerard and Leal, which I really liked. The Schutzstaffel is a video, I'd love to make a video about that in the future. And I think that they're supposed to be on a completely different plane of existence to most other characters in the series. So I don't think Ulquiorra is going to walk around one-shotting them, even in Segunda Etapa, but I do think that he would be very powerful and a force to be reckoned with, particularly if he went up against somebody like Askin, who's not crazy overpowered like the other two are. You know, love to see a Grimjo Ulquiorra tag team. That would be really, really neat. Working with Urahara as well to fight Askin, that would be awesome. I think Ulquiorra just has sheer power, you know, Lanthadel, Relampago, all that sort of thing. I think he would be incredibly tough to deal with. Yeah, I also assume as well, because once they get to Varvel, it's very difficult for the Shinigami to move around freely because the Quincy have made the Reishi so dense that they can't create proper footholds. But I wonder if Ulquiorra could still fly, because he does have wings in both of his resurrections, so that would also give him a nice advantage of getting around the final palace area. Regardless, I'd love to see it. I would really like to see it, and obviously we won't, but I think it would be really cool. I think, like I said, he would go with them, he would be reserved, but he would also know the goal, and he would work with them to achieve it. And I think that's what's crucial there. So, that's basically it, at least as far as the canon manga would go. That's it. So, to kind of sum up then, what I think would happen if Ulquiorra survived the Arrancar arc. Immediately after his fight with Ichigo, he kind of goes into hiding. He returns to a nomadic state, the state that he was in Unmasked, in his history. Obviously, he is a very new Ulquiorra, no longer truly empty. You know, he's kind of understood what it means to have a heart. He's grown slightly more human thanks to his interactions with the good guys, but he is still seeking that void, and he takes real pleasure in that alone time. And it's almost like a purgatory limbo state for him, because Aizen has fallen. Ulquiorra was very loyal to Aizen, and now he doesn't really know what to believe in. And I can see him just wandering the sands, you know, very lost, very alone. Typical Ulquiorra, basically. But I think that he would see hope, or at the very least future, in the new government, Haribel and Neliel, and he would be all for that. He wouldn't challenge for the throne, but he would try and stop Grimmjow from attaining too much power and tipping Wakemundo back towards tribalism. And then once the Quincy invade, I could see Ulquiorra joining them just for the idea of law and order, but mostly 95% I see him standing against them and proving to be a very valuable ally. I think he would make short work of Kurgeopi and the hunting army. And I think going to Varvel, it would be really interesting. I don't think there would be as much tension between him and Ichigo as you might expect. I think Ulquiorra would just keep very much to himself, and Orihime would be his point of contact with them. But yeah, that's basically it for what I think would happen if Ulquiorra survived his battle with Ichigo. Then he would obviously help out in the battles against the Schutzstaffel, but it would still be incredibly hard. It would be an incredibly difficult fight even with him involved. And then to talk briefly about Can't Fear Your Own World, a post-Thousand Year Blood War arc, Ulquiorra, again slipping more easily than ever into his new role in the Wakemundo government. And this really is kind of perfect for Ulquiorra, I think, because I've never seen Ulquiorra as evil. You know, he's not a true monster like someone like Noitoro or Baragon or Yami, who are just horrible people. He doesn't believe in anything. That's the thing. He just sees his loyalty to Aizen as really the only thing that matters to him. And Orihime and Ichigo help to change his perspective. So I think in the future, he would just do what he thought was best for Wakemundo. I don't know if maybe I'm giving him too much credit. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But I think he would undeniably work with Haribel and Neliel. It would be fascinating to see him conversing with the likes of Ichibei in the kind of aftermath of the Great Soul King War. I think it'd be really interesting. But that's it for what I think would happen if Ulquiorra survived his battle with Ichigo. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with me? This is essentially fan fiction as to what I think would happen with Ulquiorra after the fight, but let me know how right you think I am. And if you think I'm completely off base, I'd love to hear in the comments below what you think would happen to Ulquiorra after he's survived his fight with Ichigo throughout the rest of the manga. Comment below and let me know. I would love to hear it. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later. Don't forget to subscribe as well for more videos just like this one. And until then, I'll see you later.